Just a friendly reminder to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Like the episode, leave a comment. Any engagement would be appreciated. And now, Mohamad El Chemaa. Collective memory and nostalgia, I think, serve a very vital function when things are terrible. And it's nice to go back in time, even when it's not 100% true all the time.
Yeah.
It is nice to sort of lean on this. It's emotive. Let's start, with your permission, all the way back.
Okay.
Let's go back to Karantina. And I'm going to link your piece to the episode, and I'll title it here. This is in Beirut Today. It was released in April.
Yes.
Beirut's Forgotten Medical History, Quarantining Before COVID-19.
Yeah.
And I did not know that Karantina goes that far back in time, to the early 19th century.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to jump into this, but I think it's almost poetic that Karantina is on the news today.
Yeah, unfortunately.
For all the wrong reasons.
Less than stellar, yeah.
But it's still an urban planning story, and that's nearly 200 years later. Actually, it is 200 years later. 1820s until
1830, I guess roughly.
Yeah.
190, yeah.
190. Older than AUB.
Yeah, you can say that.
So I'm curious why you want to explore Karantina to begin with.
Okay.
And I'll also add here that this is your thesis subject at AUB. So I'm guessing there's a personal curiosity beyond just finishing the degree.
Yeah.
So why Karantina?
So originally, I knew nothing about Karantina. I think I only went there just once before. Coincidentally, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the blast.
That was the first time you went.
Yeah, because there was some kind of goodbye party for a friend. Long story, but originally I was just doing. I was working on stadiums and how we can adaptively reuse them, and I guess just take advantage of them as public space and all that, because most of our stadiums are locked up today, and are falling apart or are just open on the weekends for football, soccer, whatever. So that was my original thesis track, but then of course the blast happened, and by the second day I started volunteering with Ep.278, which I've been volunteering with for like 7 years now, and so they decided to work on, because I don't know if you remember this, like the first few days of the blast, a lot of people turned up and started sweeping glass and just helping in any way they could, mostly in Jemaise and Mar Mikhail, because I guess it's just like what people think of as being closest to the blast,
right? But
unfortunately, there is a place that's much closer and actually in the backyard of the port, which is the Karantina area.
Yes.
And Ep.278, originally they were going in to help rehabilitate like Jemaise or Mar Mikhail or something, or Burj Hamoud even. But they found that no one in Karantina had, no NGO, no volunteers, barely any had gone into Karantina. And that's how they decided to go in. And because I'm always in contact with them, that's how I started working there. And originally I was just like a construction volunteer. So with Ep.278, what we do is we go into these areas that have been affected by either blasts or skirmishes. So for example, Beirut Today and Jabal Mohsen in Tripoli,
right.
Or in 2012 in Ashrafi after the assassination of
Wissam
al-Hassan.
Yeah.
Of course, like those areas, there was the blast, and unfortunately there was assassinations and stuff. But at the same time, they leave like a mark. Like, I mean, the people who live there, they're affected too, and usually no one's around to help them recover. And with me, I started working there with them, volunteering with them in 2013. In Saida, there was Ahmed Asir versus the army.
Yes, right.
And that also left the area in that part of Saida devastated. And that's how I started, because there's always the skirmish, there's always the bomb, there's always whatever, but no one ever thinks of the aftermath of what happened.
You know, whether intentionally or not, you're eloquently displaying how tied up urban planning is to conflict.
Yeah.
And that every story that I think right now that you mentioned, there's a background tragedy. And Karantina, and I like the way you're saying this, that Karantina is probably the least people ignore it. You can go in and out of Beirut, and you miss Karantina,
of course,
and simply I think because of the highway.
Because of the highway, that kind of it's sort of like I guess what's the word? Not so it's technically the highway is called an infrastructural edge. It's basically cut off Karantina from the rest of Beirut, even though technically and on the map, there. I mean, technically, it's still part of municipal Beirut, but it's just most people, just either don't know about it, or they know just like. Actually, the first time I did hear about it, it was in 2019 before Thawra. Just someone had it was like a group. It was a group project we were doing about the waterfront, and how the port kind of like, just disrupts the waterfront.
Yes, right.
And then someone mentioned Karantina, and one of my partners, she's from an older generation. She's she graduated AB in the 90s, and she told me whenever I hear Karantina, I just hear horror stories because she's from that generation that lived through the Civil War. For me, Karantina never rang any bells other than what I would hear from other people. But when I actually went there and I started digging in newspapers, digging in some books, in magazines and whatever, I figured out that it also has its own story that kind of is missed or just ignored or neglected.
In a way, maybe by accident, Karantina also has a lot of the older architecture that was spared destruction post-war. And simply because real estate developers didn't think of Karantina as a sort of
developer destination.
And maybe add to that the fact that that trash dump, the landfill, is so close that many Lebanese don't think about moving to Karantina. So what you have is almost an accidental leftover.
It's enclaved in a way.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's neglected. I mean, I guess you can say politically. I mean, technically it's part of Beirut 1, but...
Which is Jamaize Maram Khayr.
Sometimes it's part of this thing called Beirut 2 when they divide it into 3.
Yes.
The story of Karantina is the story of just different flows of refugees, not just like now it's Syrian refugees, but going back to even before the Armenian refugees, Maronite refugees fleeing in the 1860 civil war in the Jabal. A lot of them settled around that area, and that's how we have Maram Khayr today. So before I'm pointing at the distance, but there's a map over here, so I swear. You know what?
let's put it in the episode. Let's bring it.
Okay.
Why not? You want to get it, or should I get it?
Sure, I'll go.
You want to get it? All right. That's what. Yeah. This is what the guest does. Goes and picks up. It's fantastic. So I'll embed this so that people can see it. But just what? Let's bring it here. Let's put it on the table.
Okay. We'll just put it on the table.
Exactly. So maybe I can put it like that actually. Okay. So I'll embed this so people can.
Okay. Yeah. So before there was a highway, and before there was a train track, and if you notice the administrative boundaries, it says Maram Khayr here in pink. It connects here. So a lot of the early Maronite refugees fleeing the Jabal, they settled around in this area, and they founded the Maram Khayr Maronite Church, which it's no longer there. A new church was built over it, but it's the same area, same plot of land.
Right.
But you notice how this is also technically called Maram Khayr, even though it's disconnected. So because before,
yes, right.
This was all considered like one area, but then this edge, it kind of like enclaved this part, and you notice how there's no port. There was no third or fourth terminal yet.
Right.
Khudr, it gets its name from the Khudr Mosque here, which is very old actually. It's one of the earliest buildings in this area, because I think you might know that Beirut was just basically here. That was it.
Yes.
And then there was the Khudr Mosque, which is kind of considered like the entryway to Beirut because it was sort of like a checkpoint, if we think of it today. And the only road leading out was Armenia Street, which I think we're on.
We are on Armenia Street.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was just this one. This was the old, and it's kind of like called the Road to Tripoli, and that was it.
So Madam Khair is disconnected from the highway.
Yeah.
And Karantina, the name Karantina is not used by
it's
the
not
Baladi.
It's not an official name.
Right.
It's just colloquial. Technically, if you want to think about it, this area, administratively speaking, is part. So in Beirut, let me just give a primer, and I'll just use the Ras Beirut as an example because it's probably the famous. So, for example, Ras Beirut is considered a quarter, and inside a quarter there's sectors. So there's Hamra sector, there's Chemaa sector, which is AUB. If you want to think of it in Karantina terms, Karantina, technically it's part of the Mdawwer quarter. And inside this quarter, there's three sectors. There's Jisr, there's Khudr, and then there's Ma'am Khair. So it's technically everything above Armenia Street. Boom. That's Mdawwer. But no one refers to it as that barely, at least everyone outside Beirut. If you go inside, people tend to call things like by the colloquial names, like either they'll just call the whole thing Mdawwer, or they'll call it Ma'am Khair if they're from an older generation before the highway.
Oh, they would still refer to it as
Yeah. I met a lot of great people there that still they used to call the at least the border between here the train.
Yes.
Because there used to be a train that passed through it. And then some people would refer to it as Khudr because there's like mini sub neighborhoods inside. There's there's also something called the Saidi Church here, Saidi Najir Church. That's where we used to have lunch. Of course, we helped fix the church, repaired everything after the blast. And they generously let us use it as like a headquarters, a mini headquarters. That's Karantina. And speaking of, I think we started off with the quarantine. This is where the quarantine used to be. And why is it here? So because this was kind of like the northernmost east. So this was Beirut, and this was the quarantine. And after like the conquest of Muhammad Ali, his son like appointed like a, I guess you can say an urban planner, Nami Bey, to kind of modernize the city, kind of like how he modernized Alexandria to be like a Levantine port city.
Right.
And by then, like I guess the popular epidemiology, I said it correctly, was, and you have to isolate people coming from.
That's when you know you're doing a master's of urban planning.
Yeah. So the proper epidemiology was you have to isolate people before coming in. Before they come into the city. And so he built a quarantine here, which was basically close to the sea and very close. So basically you would dock the boat here and then a boat would park there and then pick you up and place here. Kind of like how a lot of airports are doing now. Not now, maybe like a few months ago, you would land and then you would stay at like an airport hotel until you're clear.
Right.
So they would do tests on you and then just to make sure you're okay, you'd have to stay for something like for 2 weeks. Of course, in Lebanon, way back then, you could skirt the laws too. Because I read a lot of letters of people sitting in the quarantine and just what it was like to be there.
So I think you could do a season on those years alone because that's for good reason. There's so much material.
Yeah.
Now you just taught me something I didn't know. I had no idea that the word Karantina is colloquial.
Okay.
I knew it's Turkish for quarantine, but I didn't know that it's a colloquial district. So this is all new to me, that there's Madam Khair is cut, Al-Khudr is beyond the highway, and also it's easy to forget that the extension of the port is fairly new. So these are residential neighborhoods that largely go with the Civil War. And prior to the Civil War, and your article gets into it, but that we don't think of it other than Civil War devastation. So I guess by the Civil War, that's part of maybe the uglier side of Beirut.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But I'm curious, and before we get into Karantina, this map, which shows the rail lines, which I love here, it also shows the rail going into the port. I see footage, and this confirms it, of trains with cargo getting the wagons are being used at the port. And I always wondered where those lines go. If you're putting cargo and like from the port, where the hell would you go? And you can't imagine it today.
Yeah, no.
But it shows. It goes to the modern Khalid station, which is connected to Sin El Fil, which cuts through, and the tracks are still here. And then it goes from Sin El Fil. You can go all the way up to Tripoli or south or into the mountains. Yeah. So this is a valuable map.
Oh,
this is one of the nicest gifts I think I could think of. And
you're welcome.
You're very kind. I hope you don't take this with you when you leave.
No. It's all yours.
Good.
But speaking of the port, I just wanted to say that before the port kind of encircled it with all the new terminals, a lot of people used to go swimming here. There used to be a beach club here. There used to also be a beach here. I mean, they had the people that had connection with the sea, and unfortunately, the port just cut them off. And not just that. I mean, we were talking about trains and how organized it is just to, go from one stop to another to another.
Right.
Now with all the trucks, unfortunately, and they're not allowed to go through the inner streets, but they do it anyway. So,
yes.
I mean, when I was there, I almost got hit like 3 or 4 times, and it's not just me. Like, there's a lot of kids who play in the streets, and God forbid something happens. But it just goes to show that, like, I don't know, we need these things not just not because it's more efficient and it's cheaper, but it's also for livability wise. Like
Beirut used to attract dispossessed communities. You mentioned it earlier. There's Maronite Syrians arriving to Beirut. Some of them would quarantine. You have Armenians fleeing in World War I, fleeing the whole. I mean, they're scattered throughout the region, refugees throughout the region, and they arrive to Beirut. And it explains why this is still called Armenia Street, why there's a large Lebanese Armenian community that lives near Karantina.
Yeah.
And of course, more recently, you have Palestinian refugees that arrive, 1948. And then you have also the tragedies that happened in the 1970s. But still, there's a lot of, I think, it's almost like you're bringing the archives a bit to life in that piece. I think it's pioneering research. So I look forward to the conclusion of the thesis.
Thanks.
But this article will be embedded. Karantina is, of course, a small part of Beirut. No, sorry.
Yeah, and of course I wanted to... So, Karantina and stuff, it's, I guess you can say more or less a very affordable area where a lot of people go there because of... Beirut is just very famous for high rent and everything. So what was unique about Karantina and a few other clusters in Beirut, the other being Kerem Zaytun, is that, not for some reason, there are reasons. One of them is that it's enclaved and the typologies of the building also contribute to the affordability. And I kind of wanted to maintain that I didn't want if you look at other post-disaster cases, there's something called like post-disaster gentrification where, okay, everything's fixed up, but I don't know, like the space is different. The area is it's changed. It's new people coming in, old people unfortunately being forced out. And while I was there, I did get this. I did hear from a number of people that they were scared that, their houses are being fixed, but a lot of them were scared that what if my landlord tries to evict me? Now that my house is a bit more better than before, but at the same time, what if he or she tries to take advantage of this? So I kind of wanted to mitigate that as well. So this is in a way also a bit. It's going beyond urban planning. It's justice for the victims of the blast. Of course. You don't want them to have like a double. You don't want them to be double victims. First of course, of this huge travesty, but then again, for the recovery to be faltered, that would be reckless.
I look forward to the conclusion of that research. The next piece that you wrote, and it's for L'Orient Today.
Yeah.
So it's The Forgotten Explosion, Reconstructing the 1934 Beirut Port Blast, which came out in August 3rd.
Yeah.
One day before the 1-year anniversary. And I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but
no, it's okay.
It's all tied in together.
Yeah.
And that, even on this map, you can tell that the expansion of the port changes Karantina permanently. The port blast destroys Karantina.
Unfortunately,
devastates Karantina, and that it's almost the two stories are
intertwined.
embedded.
Yeah.
So please keep going.
I saw the headline, Beirut port blast kills 30, and I immediately think, oh, there must be some kind of mistake. The ProQuest, the whatever, it might have given me like an article, because you can set limits. You can be from 1920 something to 1940 something,
right?
And this must have slid in, but no, it was an actual article from I think the New York Times or the Palestine Post, and then I opened it and I just saw improperly stored chemicals, port, this amount of casualties, customs, just everything that we're still facing today, and we faced on August 4th. Well, after I learned about it, I just wanted to see, because there are a few books about the Beirut port. Some of them are in French, and I did look into them and nothing. And then I don't know. I looked into so we have Parliament. I don't know if you know this, but we can actually access the Parliament minutes, all of them mostly.
Really?
Yeah, it's on a website. It's not. It's like HTTP, where it's like unsecure, but whatever.
Is it nabihbirri.net?
No. But it's
Siberia.
Like, no, it's like a very HTML dry, bricks and mortars kind of website. But I mean, you can access the minutes, and okay, it's mentioned the day after the blast, but then everything after, there's no mention of it. There's no mention of
so just that day it's mentioned.
Like the day after it happened, they convened like an emergency session or something, and it's mentioned, but in all the other minutes, nothing. And then the news. Okay, and it wasn't just the American press that covered it. Of course, a lot of local press covered it, and I looked into it, Nahar and Ma'rad newspapers and stuff, and they covered the first few days, and then they just stopped covering. And it's just so weird. It's just like, I don't know.
I mean, I know it's speculation, but why would you think that this is not a better documented tragedy? Is it simply that it's just buried, that we don't really have enough local reporters covering it, that it's New York Times, was it just New York Times, Palestine Post, and...
Oh, so it was widely covered.
Oh, it was widely covered.
In the U.S.
Oh.
In the U.S., so I guess you can say C to C, so New York, and then on the other side, it's like the San Bernardino something. It's covered there. It's covered in Europe, in a lot of French newspapers, in North Africa, also French newspapers, and in Lebanon, covered by Nahar and Ma'rad, and Lorient, of course. So covered, but then it just, a few days later, it just stops. I don't know why. And I wanted to see if there were any French mandate sources on it, and unfortunately, none of them are digitized. And at the time, none of them are digitized. And at the same time, you can only access them in France at the place.
Right.
So mostly a dead end there. But I looked at the Parliament papers, and initially they were like, we're going to offer them compensation and everything, the victims and stuff. And I did find something just even weird, just not weird, or just coincidentally, there was 6 months before that, there was also like an event where a building collapsed that housed like a famous cafe called Al-Kawkab al-Sharqi, like the Eastern World or something cafe. So in that building, the building collapsed, and there's victims everywhere and stuff, and it's also widely covered. But the victims don't get any compensation, even though the money is donated and it's collected and it's sourced and whatever, but none of it gets dispersed. And while they're talking about the blast, they say, but why was one of the MPs says, why was nothing distributed from their fund? Like, if we're going to do a fund for the Beirut port blast, the old one, whatever happened to the fund for the Al-Kawkab al-Sharqi building collapse? So it's like, I don't know, that I'm sure that fund was embezzled somehow. I don't know. It's just weird how we're just, I mean, all these tragedies happen, and then we're not really equipped, or I mean, the people in charge aren't,
I'm going to throw just a guess.
Yeah.
It's just hypothetical. Could it just be that there's been so much tragedy since that this is not considered one of the more tragic events?
Probably.
And maybe because it's 1930s, World War II is around the corner, independence, and then you have also 1948, you have Nakba, you have all of the Lebanese tragedy that happens, that maybe just gets lost in that sort of larger mess of war.
Probably. It's not the only tragedy, unfortunately. Yeah. I guess I mean, maybe in the U.S., I guess you have like Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and the Unabomber and stuff. I think you remember. But I mean, they're not as recurrent as in Lebanon, and also Lebanon's a lot smaller, I guess. But what I found interesting about this case, and initially I wasn't even planning on writing anything about it. I just probably wanted to tweet it out, like, oh, something like that. But what I found interesting is that not only did the coverage just stop, but the victims weren't properly compensated, but also the location where it happened, it was kind of like spatially erased, as if to say it never really happened.
I appreciate that this article does that in a way. It reminds us that the city is not permanent.
Mm-hmm.
There have been multiple tragedies, even before its independence. And it's important for us to remember why we have a consistent problem, and your article emphasizes it. It's the issue of impunity and immunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you're going down that road. Those are the heavier subjects.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to jump into a bit of nostalgia, which makes me happy. It's the tramway.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into rail.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about rail, but let's start with the tram. Now, I think this is actually why I really wanted to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I'm driving down Bliss, or better, when I'm walking on Bliss,
Mm-hmm.
I look for the rail.
Yeah.
And every now and then it's exposed.
It pops up, yeah.
Pops up just a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen it anywhere else in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I see it on Bliss.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to know why?
Tell me.
So I guess in the article I kind of explore how we got rid of it and stuff. And there was a tiny part that was cut out.
Sorry, let me title it. I should always title your articles because they're worth reading. This is more recent. Actually, this is 3 or 4 days ago.
A week ago.
A week ago.
Yeah, it came out Saturday. So.
Saturday, right. Yeah. Whatever happened to our alternative modes of transport? 25th September.
Yeah.
Lorient Today, again. So I interrupted you.
So it was actually a part of the article, but, it just didn't really fit in. But so we removed it. But so...
That's why it goes into the podcast.
Yeah. So in the process of getting rid of the tram and stuff, we had all these tram lines still there. And still there, I guess, towards the 80s. I have pictures of people on Bliss Street. I'm into sports a lot, so I have these old pictures of judo people. Long story. I guess, can we show it?
Yeah, sure.
I'll send it to you on WhatsApp.
Okay, please.
But
of you playing judo?
No.
Okay.
Of people training for judo competitions on the street. Long story. And who's going to remove them? So the municipality and the Ministry of Transport, they kind of got into a dispute who's responsible. I mean, it's the municipality, it's their streets, it's their whatever. But I mean, the agency that's undertaking this, wide scale project, it's the ministry. So, and it's all, always comes down to budget reasons and resources and all that stuff. So there was a dispute over who would do it. But in the end, it was just cheaper to not remove them and just to pave asphalt over them.
Oh, so sorry. I should maybe frame this better. The tram system predates the French mandate.
Yes.
And
1907.
1907. And the French then expanded aggressively during the mandate. That it's not right. It's not it's not that the original network survives it grows with the French mandate.
Yeah. And as Beirut grows as a city as well.
Right.
But after in the 60s, as they're getting ready to transition to just buses, what do we do with all these,
right,
these giant, and I don't know if you were around Beirut in like 2019.
In the 60s?
Pre-Thawra.
Yeah, I was.
They were doing all this road work on Bliss Street, and they did uncover and unearth a lot of the tram lines, and they did finally remove them. It's a shallow grave, if you may.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up on Bliss.
Yeah.
I remember them. Before they would pave them up completely, before Bliss kept getting higher and higher, and the sidewalks kept getting higher, both were exposed, both sides. And I mean, this maybe my teenage years, was always not understanding why they were there, not being used. And then I had heard that the tramway system went back to pre-World War One, late Ottoman planning. But I didn't know the full story of its expansion. And if you can just share a bit on whether or not the tram system was effective for Beirut.
Okay.
And the reason I'm asking it this way, it seems like it dies due to the car.
Yeah, the age of the automobile.
Yeah.
And so
it dies a very sudden death.
Unfortunately, so what happened was it did serve Beirut, and long story. So we were talking earlier about just the noise it makes and stuff. So when it was initially launched and stuff, a lot of people used to live on the ground floor. And because of the noise and because of the not just the ten and like the actual wheels on the rail, it would make a lot of noise and just annoy a lot of people. So what would happen was a lot of them would just move to higher floors
because of the tram.
Because it was so annoying. I mean,
right.
if we're we're not very high above the ground, but can you imagine? It's kind of like I don't know, like
sounds like of a bus maybe driving
kind
by.
Of. Yeah. So they would move upward, and they'd retrofit and convert the ground floors into stores. And the tram kind of played a role in creating a lot of the commercial streets that we know of today.
Right.
So it played a purpose in that. Of course, it was a very cheap mode of transport. So the second class like side of the tram, it was I think 5 piasters.
Yes.
Which I don't know how does that translate into Arabic? Mishnat lira. Idish, yeah. And then the first class one was 10 Kurdish, whatever. Idish.
Oh, so this is like
yeah. So and it compared to the diesel buses and the services, it was way cheaper.
Right. So
it helped. A lot of people who didn't make that much to get from point A to point B, to get to work and stuff, and I guess from a more urban planning perspective, what light rail does is that it prevents urban sprawl. And sprawl is basically when the city overflows or it's just kind of like uncontrolled growth.
Right.
So it helps tie in the city.
And I read also, I think it's in your article, that the price didn't change from the late 30s?
No, until the extinction,
60s. Yeah, so in a way, it wasn't catching up properly with.
So it was towards the late 50s and 60s. I mean, a lot of people were complaining because the system was still there. It was the old system. It was sluggish and slow. So people would say, "Oh, it's causing a lot of traffic. Oh, can we do something about this?" And there were 2 routes to take. One of them was just update the system. It's faster, more efficient, blah blah blah. And or get rid of it and just replace it with something else, the buses ultimately. And the reason why they went with the bus route, no pun intended, whatever.
But before we go into the bus, I'm sorry I keep interrupting you here because it's the details for me are the most interesting thing about this.
I'm gonna get to it. So the reason why is because the price hadn't changed from 1939 to 62. There was, if they had raised the price and that, I don't know, I guess it wasn't financially worth it to just update the system and to maintain the upkeep. That's kind of like one of the reasons why it went into this, because it wasn't like a money making machine or something.
But just to try to understand it better, I have photos and there's some video of it, not much. Were there tram stops?
Technically, yeah, but so a lot. So the thing about the tram article...
The reason I'm asking is I know from my childhood that people would refer to where I was living was near Mhattat Duke.
Okay.
Which was a tram stop on Bliss or near Bliss. So people were still saying this in the service.
Yeah.
نزلني حد محطة Duke. I was like, what the hell is Mhattat Duke?
Okay.
So it was a tram stop.
Okay.
But I can't imagine Beirutis waiting at a tram stop to board a tram.
No. Yeah. I get what you mean. And that's the thing. The tram would kind of stop at the stop, and then it would go back. Because a lot of the primary sources complaining that I read about it, and actually, originally how I got into the tram, I think this is I don't want to say years in the making, but I actually got into it back in 2015, and I read all these sources and stuff, and I didn't do anything with them. And then with the whole, what's his name, Raymond Rajar thing, just use the tram. We didn't say use the tram. Just use some alternative means of transport, as if we have any.
I think he meant the subway.
Yeah, no. That's kind of what motivated me to write this. But originally, I had a lot of other stuff on the trams past. So no, it would technically stop, but people would have to jump, like, or else. And then there was a game that people played, was like, who can jump on the tram while it's going.
Right, yes.
Which I find scary.
I've seen videos, it looks like that.
Yeah.
People are jumping in and out.
Yeah.
So it's not that the tram was used like a service. It wasn't that it was stopping random places.
No.
Okay.
But, I mean, technically, yeah, but it wouldn't stop for long, you know? So,
yeah.
And it wasn't, I'm not saying it was perfect, but it's just that, I don't know, what happened afterwards is that we got rid of the tram. We had buses in. However, and at the same time, so it was a bunch of things. And it's funny that you had Sami Ismail on last time.
I was going to say it's his grandfather,
Yeah,
right?
Pierre Ismail is his grandfather. Yeah. He was the Minister of Transport. He's the one who spearheaded this project.
Right. And you tell me if this is, I'm trying to remember now. It's in the Fouad Chehab government when they're...
Yeah.
It's in early 60s.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Pierre Ismail has to decide whether or not to throw this whole system away or bring in the bus.
Yeah.
It brings in the bus, causes more traffic.
It causes more traffic, but for a number of reasons. Back then, they were expanding the roads, building bridges, building highways and stuff. One of them is the Fouad Chehab Highway. The other one is Istiklal Street, which it's the one that technically was supposed to connect Ashrafi with Said, but I can't find it. Well, yeah, technically, is it? Oh, okay. Technically, it's supposed to do this, but it never. Long story about why never that panned out. So a bunch of road works. Well, this is from
it's not here yet, right?
This is 1950s. Yes. That happened in the 1960s.
Right.
Well, technically, it does pan out like this. It's what we call today, like from Sodeko to Basta to
yes, exactly.
To the Druze headquarters.
Karakon.
Not Karakon, the Druze. It's like before Verdun. There's like a
Karakon Druze.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's like the whole. It's like the
temple.
Yeah. Oh. That's kind of like Istiklal. And now it's Sarkis, technically. It's called that.
Right.
So at the time they were doing all these road works. They had gotten rid of light rail, which is the tramway. And what happens is this thing called induced demand, where like you try to fix the traffic problem by, I guess, widening the roads or something. But what happens is more cars are on the road because there's more space.
Right.
And at the same time, there's less people are using the bus because it's more expensive than the tram. So people are going into like services and stuff. So in a sense, ironically, it ended up increasing traffic. And that's what leads to, it causes Pierre Ismail to commission a study from Soviet engineers. Can we do a metro? And it wasn't the first study. There was...
Can we do...
Oh. Yeah.
I should give a shout out here to Tala Ramadan. She gave me this as a gift. She's like, why don't you use this on your episodes? I say, I use them. She doesn't have no proof that I'm using it. There's her proof. Thank you. That's the metro system that wasn't.
And Eric Verdal, he's also an urban planner. He said, he wrote somewhere that they did try doing a metro, the French, with Michel Ecochard, who was the master urban planner of Beirut back then, in the early 60s and 63, and that didn't really go anywhere. But there was a Beirut, what's it called? Blog Balade,
Yes, of course, Najib, forgot his last name.
Same. But yeah, so...
He's actually a friend. Did you know this?
Oops. Can we cut this?
No, we'll keep it in. He'll enjoy it.
So Blog Balade published something 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I forgot when, about like a Soviet plan to build a metro. But we don't really know why it never panned out. So what I found out doing this research is that, yeah, it was commissioned and it was studied and like, should we go for it or not? But just feasibility-wise, they didn't go for it because it would have cost like $1 billion Lebanese lira, which I think at the time, if it's like 3 liras for $1, which is a lot. It's like
So, yeah.
600 million. I don't know.
And that it wouldn't be ready until the year 2000.
Year 2000,
Right.
and they were like just betting on the new highways that they were building, the ring and the.
So it ended up being, I mean, the car. You gave great figures, and I want to remember the exact number.
Yeah.
It's something like, oh, here it is, and I'll quote you, which I love doing. The new buses were not affordable to the masses as they cost 45 piastres each to ride. Commuters opted to take cabs instead. The widening of streets and building of new highways led to what is known as induced demand, which you mentioned earlier, which explains the increase in the number of cars in Lebanon. From 76,000 in 1962 to 130,000 in 1967.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And by 1970, it was 150.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's just multiplying.
Yeah.
Within a very short period of time. You know, that explains why Beirut looks, I'll say this carefully, it looks uglier.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah.
And it's not just the filter, it's not the camera.
Yeah.
It's cars.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, the roads, if you think about it, these narrow roads, if you're in a car, it's annoying. You can't find parking. You have to, like, be very careful not to hit someone's mirror or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, like, it's a great place to walk and bike and whatever, because on the one hand, you have, like, on both sides of the road, you have these buildings that are, like casting shadows against each other, and they're creating, like, they're just, they're hiding the sun.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just... And like a lot of these old Ashrafi and some Jemmais and Markhan, it's just so much nicer to walk in these places than it is in, like, for example, I don't know, next to Hotel Dieu or next to Masra or next to Charles Hello.
Can we go back though a bit? I've seen skeletons of what the network looked like, and it seems like it covered most of Beirut. That the tram, you could pretty much get to
more or less. Yeah. There are transit gaps, and that's what the buses were trying to solve. But if you look at today, and if you look at the bus map, and the unofficial one, it's not we don't have an official one.
Yeah.
There are gaps in there too, and that's what forces us to write service. So, like,
right.
I guess. But the tram,
it seems like they were thoughtful to try to include most of Beirut in this network, which is. The reason it seems so bizarre to me is that there's heavy investment in this tram network. It is slow. Maybe by the early 1960s, it's a bit outdated. It needs rejuvenation. It needs money. But that it's a damn shame that this reckless decision is made, which I think is really the beginning of the end of that livable Beirut, the way maybe there's some nostalgia towards. Where the skyline changes, the buildings become better designed for cars in the sense that you have these unnecessary buildings emerging in the 1970s, and you have traffic.
Yeah.
And the tranquility of the city erodes. And you make this a point in the article that it's not just Beirut. The world many cities are experiencing this problem. But I like the way the article sort of goes in a different direction, because it's not just the tram. You have the tram network and you have the train. And you have rail. And the rail network that continued even post-war. Yeah. So I vaguely remember this. The choo-choo train along the coast. Yeah. But let's go back to the beginning. I've done an episode, which I know that you listened to, with Ilyas Marouf, who helped found Train. Yeah. That we had a sophisticated rail network that went to the mountains, steep terrain that was not in Europe yet. No. It was here. It's a rail network that seems to not make it through, not just because of the Civil War, but that perhaps cars were, in a way, disincentivizing to go from Tripoli, let's say Tripoli to Beirut, or Beirut to the mountains. That you had other options. Yeah. And the fact that it even persisted post-war, to me, is still quite remarkable. But can you, in a way, help explain why our rail network was so sophisticated at the turn of the century, and why 100 years later it's gone? Okay. Because it's not just war. It's not just civil war.
No, and I growing up, I don't know. I remember, like, unfortunately, like after 9/11, I just got scared. I mean, I was only 6, but just seeing the horrific event unfold on TV, I was just like, okay, we're not gonna fly anymore. Can we take the train? And my mom was like, there is no train. That's like my earliest memory of like, oh, like you know how there's this show. I mean, I used to watch it as a kid. What is it? The Thomas the Train. I just took it for granted that we had trains because of cartoons and stuff. But I had no idea.
Great.
Yeah. I had no idea that we had gotten rid of ours. But so yeah, Lebanon was actually one of the first countries in the Middle East to get a very wide scale railroad network in 1895. It was like a French. It was a French company that was funded by BNP Paribas. Sorry, that helped build it, and they connected it to what was going on in Iraq and Syria, to the German trains that were being built there.
Yes.
And it was a very extensive network, and it was primarily due, like Elias Malouf says, to Beirut's a bustling port. We need to, and trains, ports, all these things are about efficiency.
From my limited research on this area of transport, my understanding is that rail was not being used that much by the 70s. That the passengers were not using the rail frequently. Buses and cars were, in a way, becoming the option. And that if you were living outside of Beirut and you were coming to, say, you wanted to shop in Hamra and go back wherever you're going, people would just take a car or they take a taxi. Even if the train option was still there. So I'll give you an example. I have seen no material related to scheduling or that the frequency of trains, how many times they were stopping in these stations daily. I may be wrong in this, but that it was primarily freight prior to the war.
I heard that too. Scheduling, I think I do have something about that.
Do you?
But I don't know where it is. It's one of my drives. I'll double check.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to see.
Yeah. But
it could be once a day.
Something like that. But I do know that I did hear from a bunch of people who kind of lived through that era that, it was mostly freight by towards the end of the war. But, yeah.
In other words, it's not just the war. It was the government was neglecting this what was once essential for the country. Even that, it was still a one-line system. You couldn't go both directions at the same time.
No.
So you had a train going north, waiting, and then another train would head south. So they were always.
And that's what the '94 plan kind of tried to solve. They did they wanted to do a double rail electrically powered system where it's like going up, going down.
Right. Yeah. But does that really have to do with just cars? At the end of the day, made it
autocentric. I don't know. I guess it would require more research on my part. Best.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. But it's a good diving off point for something new, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure. I mean, I know at least for light rail, that is true because we just got rid of it, and then the plans for metros and stuff, they weren't really going off the ground. But I guess going from maybe Beirut to Saida or Tripoli to Saida or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take it now to the alternative modes that are not around that should be around. Something that was floated half a century ago, if not longer, metro system, that never happened.
No.
Then you have, what I remember, is the water taxi.
Yes.
And I remember the campaign. This is early social media years where it wasn't that easy to promote.
No.
His name escapes me now. I remember kind of what he looks like too. I remember him, the way he looked next to that water taxi, and it was going to solve Lebanon's problems. You'd go from Tripoli to Sur, Saida to Jbel, Jbel to Beirut, Beirut to Sur, Saida. I mean, the whole coast.
He did float the idea, and he did do a whole campaign back in 2011. And then I think you remember there was a change of government. So originally it was, which is kind of like now Saad Hariri,
right?
Mikati.
Yes.
Speaking of which, and I didn't mention this in the article, but from 1999 to 2003, it was Nasheed Mikati who was the transport minister.
Right.
And he did kind of try to push it through, didn't really work. He privatized the bus system so that more, buses. So back then, it was mostly government-owned buses that were shuttling people, but then private buses got into the market, and then he did try to push for international trains. Like he did launch something between he tried launching something between Tripoli and Syria. It's called Aboudi, and then between Raya and Raya.
I think it's Rayak.
Rayak.
Yeah.
Between Rayak and also Syria on that side of the border. But also that kind of got halted because of the Hariri assassination in 2005. But in 2011, and Hariri kind of picks it up and I guess puts it on the agenda. Then there's like a change in government. You remember there was like 1/3 resignation and...
Tamim Slim, I think, becomes...
No.
It was before, of course, yes.
Yeah, remember it's like the 1/3 of the cabinet resigns, and anyways.
Hariri is...
Yeah.
He leaves Lebanon.
And then Mikati comes in, and then by 2012, it's, I think as we say in Lebanon, it's stuffed in the drawer.
But that kind of project would have to survive multiple administrations. And it seemed, I don't know much about it other than it came and went very quickly. But it's an idea.
Yeah.
And it could be done. Other countries have that kind of transport.
Yeah, in Turkey, I guess it's the most famous example. Where you can just park your car inside the thing and just go on the second floor and then...
I remember I went to Malta, our colony in the Western Mediterranean. Driving into a ship, and a ship that goes from island to island made perfect sense. You don't have to worry about... You just drive, you're in the ship, you drive out of the ship. And I could see this. It makes sense. Why do you need to get stuck in Antilles, Bayi, Deep for hours when you
bottlenecks,
you just drive to Tripoli via ship.
Yeah.
But that's off the table, or it doesn't seem to be even being discussed at the moment. I know that the World Bank proposed a somewhat simple but well-funded rapid bus lane that was supposed to alleviate some of that traffic.
Yeah.
Now it's being diverted to emergency funds and the ration card. Or I don't know if it's been agreed to, but that seems to be in the...
2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a report in L'Orient du Jour that the government, I think it was the outgoing government, that they proposed it. Can we just have, instead of having, instead of having the BRL rapid bus lane, can we just fund the ration card instead?
Right.
And according to that report, the World Bank was kind of willing to do it, or with certain conditions, of course. But that idea I think was floated originally in 2012 as just rail. Then it went something like that, and then it went in 2015. There was I did link the proposals and the design. It switched to bus, and then by 2017 I think, or 2018, it got kickstarted that we're going to have it and it's going to go. And it was a bit controversial. If you look in the plans, you deep dive into them, because they wanted to get rid of a stretch of the Corniche.
Yes.
To build the Corniche, facing AUB. To reserve that strictly for the bus. And I don't know. I felt like, on the one hand, yes, it's a good idea because it's like the bus doesn't stop at all. It doesn't have to be stuck in traffic or anything. But at the same time, it was kind of encroaching on public space. But these not little, but these details can be worked out. But I don't know. I feel like diverting it into a ration card, and the whole reason we have a ration card is because subsidies were lifted, and the whole reason we have subsidies in the first place is because the economy is crashing. Why is the economy crashing? Because the banks won't give us our money. There's no investment. There's nothing in Lebanon. And the thing about light rail and heavy rail and just transport, it helps attract business. If you look into all the research and the literature and whatever, it's one of the things that motivates businesses and whatever to invest in countries, because the people who are going to end up working in those businesses, they need to get from point A to point B without having to have a headache or get stuck in traffic and waste precious, not precious, well, yeah, it is precious time. And there was a World Bank estimate in 2012 saying that it cost car owners something like cumulatively like 7.5% of our GDP.
Because of traffic.
Because of traffic.
Yeah.
Not just traffic, owning a car, gas, oil, parts. The current crisis, you can connect it a little bit to just our dilapidated transport network in a way, just a little bit. Like,
it seems that transit, the rise and fall of alternative modes of transit, transport, is just a mirror reflection of the rise and fall of modern Lebanon. That they almost go hand in hand. You have that hiccup post-war where certain things come back briefly. It's not a sophisticated rail network. It's a very sluggish late 1970s train system that goes in certain parts of the country only. The tram now, imagining a tram in Beirut is almost folklore. Just the electricity that would be necessary to run a tram.
I agree, but let's think, and maybe the world is perfect. There's no problems. A tram, despite, let's just not think of the kind of the crisis we're going through right now. A tram would be the best option because we have so much archaeology underneath the country.
Yeah.
If we dig for subways, then the excavations alone would take years and years and years to do, and we can't perceive them. So it would be the best option. If things were perfect, which they're not.
And I can't even imagine a subway even without the archaeological problem. But that kind of long-term planning requires long-term stability. I think it just makes sense that transport require a certain level of functioning alternative modes of transport requires a certain level of stability. And Lebanon, the Lebanese state paid a price and transport died with it. I'd like to maybe wrap it up on a lighter note. You're a young urban planner. You're part of Beirut Urban Lab at AUB. You live and breathe urban planning, obviously. Otherwise, you wouldn't bring this lovely gift. And I'm going to cherish this.
Thanks.
I'm assuming your professional career will, for better or worse, be tied in to at least recent tragedy. And that whether it's Karantina, whether it's just the aftermath of the port blast, or for that matter, trying to rejuvenate some transport in this country, that there's going to be tragedy in the story as well. What, in your mind, is the most pressing urban planning matter at this moment? You hinted at Karantina earlier, which I liked, that you're talking about a specific case, and that's your thesis. But if you had the World Bank on speed dial.
I know what I'm going to say, and I know there's like 1,000 billion issues, but just, I'm trying to think of a perfect world, just our sidewalk system.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's like the biggest problem. No, there's hunger, there's poverty, there's just all kinds of things happening today. It's just fudged up. I don't know. But no, just even before the crisis, just the sidewalk system was just dilapidating. Like, it was it was just, you can barely walk, a straight line without being cut off by a car that's parked on the middle of the sidewalk, which, by the way, is a 50,000 fine. That's never applied. I don't know why.
Is there a fine for it?
It's I think the Beirut made it illegal. But I guess we only fine just red lights, and back when we had street lights. Anyways, just I don't know. Make it a sidewalk network, because I don't know if you've noticed. It's not like it's fragmented in a way. It's like not just people parked on it, or this tiny little part of it that's destroyed, or there's just no sidewalk at all. It's just that it's not the same everywhere. It's not accessible 100%. I'm not saying it's the most pressing issue. It's just a dream of mine. It's just create a sidewalk network, not just in Beirut. Beirut's really bad, but in Saida, there's no sidewalk network at all, barely. There used to be one, but a lot of the new developments, they're just eating up. So
it hurts when I see buildings, newer buildings, taking over a previously planned sidewalk, and the municipality does nothing about it. So take the sidewalk. What's the sidewalk for anyway? And I remember Hamra, even in the 90s, walking in Hamra was easier. A lot of these newer buildings tore up the sidewalk. You said it earlier, Madam Khair Jamaisi, these are walkable neighborhoods. I zigzag my way across Madam Khair and Jamaisi for all the reasons you mentioned. It's an obstacle course, and it's dangerous.
Of course.
And then thinking, I want to walk to Karantina. Karantina is walking distance from here. I could never even dream. It's like, I would never even think about it.
There is an overpass.
Yes, there is an overpass.
Which, it's not ideal, though.
Yeah.
And a good way to connect it, and we thought about this in a way, just so I don't know if you know, so this area, it's owned by the municipality. This one, I think it's owned by the government, because it's the railroad. Why not just do like an underpass here, and then you can physically connect it without people having to fly high, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously a tunnel is very expensive to do, especially in Lebanon where it's just overhead everywhere. But just as an idea, just like, you don't have to kill the entire, well, technically, I guess it would be this is technically a freeway. But you don't have to kill the entire thing, just a little patch of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That way you connect the rest of Karantina to the rest of Beirut. I don't know.
But I'm glad you're talking about walking. I mean, that was also the dream of mine when I used to give my walking tour, was to be able to walk without hassle. I mean, all the obstacles of trying to walk across Beirut alone, and then with a group, forget about it. It's very difficult. So that's the dream. That shows also how simple, how simple a dream can be. Sidewalk, and then how
complicated.
It's a nightmare to do that. I fully support that dream.
Thank you.
And if you ever pursue that as a serious cause, you have an ally ready to do it. Because I'd like to walk in Beirut and drive less. I had the Chain Effect members on a few weeks ago. Elena Haddad and Zainai, her last name escapes me now. But their dream is an elaborate cycling network.
I mean, and I kind of talked about it in my article. Like,
yes, I saw it.
I mean, the cars are encroaching on the sidewalks and on everything, on our lives. By the way, I mean, a lot of the building code today, it's shaped around cars, because if you want to build a building, you need to have enough parking spaces in it. And unfortunately, in some cases, that hinders a lot of like affordable developments from, coming in. I mean, of course, there's land prices, there's cost of building, but even that aspect come in. It also, just cars are, I mean, I got here in a Bolt, which is like an Uber. So it's just horrific how autocentric, our universe is. And when you look at, I mean, I'm not saying we should compare Paris and Amsterdam and whatever, but why not, Why not? What's stopping us? I mean, obviously we're broke and we're whatever, but it's just always good to have that dream,
And it's emphasized in your articles that we once had that. Why not aim for it again?
Yeah.
And also that and it's towards the end of this piece, you say it up front, Lebanon needs to make up for lost time. But the current financial crisis may stop such development dead on its tracks. So let's hope two things temper themselves: the economic collapse, the political paralysis, and that people like you can enter the halls of power and do the basics from sidewalks to the more constructive, like rehabilitating Karantina, and also a sense of I think it's more than urban planning. It's justice to Beirut. It's a city that everyone speaks highly of, and when you walk around today, it's sort of increasingly hard to know why. So, thank you for this lovely gift.
My pleasure.
Thank you for making your way over to Madam Khair.
No problem.
And if you want, we can walk to Karantina.
No, we won't.
Actually, I think you'd be up for it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go. No, well, maybe not tonight. But I'll
schedule something.
We'll schedule. Yeah. Maybe I can see Karantina through your eyes.
Definitely.
Hamad, thank you.
Thank you.